Hi Sai, Karate Illuminati, this is Noah. Today I want to go over your Gedan-Uke or Gedan-Barai, your low block or low sweep, and how to generate power for it, depending on what you're doing with it. So there's two schools of thought on generating power for this, generally. You have the move your body in the direction of the technique, which would be generally up and away, and back down and across. Or you have the opposite, where the hip on the lead side there with that block goes forward more this way. So you've got that, and you've got that. Now, different styles and schools will do this differently as kind of their standard. But when you're looking at it from a practical, functional perspective, you need to know what you're doing with those things. So it does make a difference. If I'm going to be doing this one, where I move in the same direction, I'm essentially using it as a big baseball bat. I am swinging this arm across, and I'm swinging it down, and I'm trying to get the same kind of motion that you get out of a baseball bat swing. You are trying to just cut across, or in this case, cut down. That's really effective for things like striking with your Gedan-Barai. So if you are trying to specifically strike somebody in the groin, for example, having this away, down, if this is an arm, I've got a little bit of a pull that can actually make them step into that groin strike even, as part of my setup. So I set up, pull them in, and swing down low, this way. Now, if you're emphasizing the strike, that works really well. If you want to emphasize the arm, you may not want to do that quite so much. Because if you actually do this as a drag and torque back and hit, then of course you're losing that connection to the arm. If I want to, say, wrench the elbow and just sort of lock it out straight, that's something where shooting this out this way, still my Gedan-Barai, but now because this side is leading and being driven forward, this side's pulling back more. The arm is then levered across my chest. This braces in front of them so they can't step as easily. It's kind of the opposite idea. Instead of using the arm to pull them into a strike, we're using the strike to brace so that they can't get away from the lock as easy. And this is just one example of what you can do with Gedan-Barai. But again, I've got my swinging, striking version where I pull as my setup and swing in to hit hard to the groin, and then I follow up with something else most likely. Or I have my setup where I pull them in, and then I'm going to thrust this out. And again, I can actually try to bend his arm, just like I'm doing with this belt as my sort of imaginary arm. I can try to bend it, because if you try to bend somebody's arm, usually they'll try to resist you, which might make pulling it straight a little easier. So I might bend as my setup, and then I'm going to shoot this across this way, pulling their arm across my chest and bracing in front of their groin or their hips so that when they try to step to get away from this lock, they don't have anywhere to go, really. If nothing else, the joint lock still gives me a little bit extra power on the groin strike just because they're stepping into it. So you're really getting a 2-for-1 deal on this one. You have the option for a joint lock on the elbow and a groin strike as well. And hopefully, they'll fall down from one of those two things. But again, when you're looking at your body mechanics, it's typical for a style or an organization or school to have a standard, and that's the thing that they teach, and that's what you're supposed to do in your kata and your kihon. But when you get into the application of the techniques, and whether you're trying to do some training by yourself, or you're trying to work them effectively with partners or training equipment, you may find that the standard mechanic doesn't always work that well with the application you're doing. You've got to change it. And so you really need to be willing to make those adjustments on the fly based on what you're trying to do. Now, you can still do some of the same basic concepts and just end up doing something a little different. So if I wanted to do an arm bar, right, like this one, but my style doesn't do the hip lead, and I don't want to do something different from the standard, you can still do an arm bar. It's not that you can't, but you're going to do a different one. So the same pull and swing that we did as the groin strike, you can do that as a joint lock if I pull and swing. But I do have to sort of adjust my distancing a little bit more and make some other adjustments. So this is one of those things where those phrases like, practice kata correctly, combat is another matter, which I believe was said by Funakoshi Gichin, the founder of Shotokan. That's where those things come into play. Yes, you may have a very specific way that you do it in the kata. When you're applying it, these things are going to change based on how tall your opponent is, or how short they are, how big they are, how strong they are, what they do in reaction to what you're attempting to do, and you may have to make adjustments. Your kata is not going to, show you a Gedan-Barai and then go, well, you could do it this way, or you could do it this way, or you could step back, or you could sit forward, or you could turn. It's not going to show you all of those examples. It just would take too long to get through all of the innumerable possibilities. So it's giving you a template to work from, and it's up to you to adapt that as necessary, which of course requires a lot of partner training, resistant training, sparring, and that sort of thing. So this was hopefully something to get kind of your thought process going. I used one example, but you'll actually find this in a lot of different techniques, whether it's your shuto with different mechanics, your middle blocks, all kinds of techniques that are slightly different, even as far as movements that come out this way are maybe either swinging or shooting, depending on your style or the kata. So these are things that I would suggest you try not to look at in terms of right and wrong so much as just different variations on the same theme.